Hello and welcome to the digital product community. I'm Jason Norton, and today we're going to be talking about a soft skill, which is time management. So there's a lot of benefits to effectively managing your time, right? You can be increasing your productivity, reducing your stress because you're not worried about what you're supposed to be working on next, or you're so far ahead that you've got things under control. And ultimately, you can have a better work-life balance as well. So first, let's talk about planning your time. You can be reactive with your time management, or you can be proactive, right? So typically when we're reactive, we're we're adapting to what's being thrown our way and we're not really planning things out, right? So when we're being reactive, that can lead to stress, anxiety, missed deadlines, tasks falling off your radar, and really a lack of trust by those that you're working with. So when you're proactive and you're making a plan, you are going to be the opposite of all those things, right? You're going to be better prepared. You're going to have less stress. You're going to be hitting deadlines and taking care of everything that needs to be taken care of, right? Nothing will fall through the cracks. So let's talk about being proactive. One of the things that I would always do is at the end of each week, which you typically know by the end of the week, you know what you need to accomplish the next week, right? Things are fresh on your mind. So let's say Friday rolls around. I used to sit down and I would plan out my week ahead, right? Because ultimately what happens is over the weekend, you end up forgetting a few things that were fresh on your mind as far as what you need to accomplish. And so I always liked planning things out at the end of my business day on Friday. And I would at least hit and know what my top priorities were for Monday morning that I needed to continue working on. And I would just take a look at things and I would make sure that I had a little outline where I documented what I needed to do. Then the next day, Monday would roll around. I would then take a look at that prioritized list and I would always be like, oh yeah, I forgot about that thing. Let me take care of that right now, right? And so I would review it and I would make sure that nothing came in over the weekend or early Monday morning that I needed to accommodate first. And then I would start diving into those tasks that I had planned out the week before. The other thing I would do is at the end of each day, I would look at what I needed to accomplish the next day, right? Like, again, I would repeat that cycle of just being mindful of what I was working on that day or that week, and then how was that going to impact the next day. And that was a game changer for me because I worked with a lot of people that they would work really hard Monday through Friday. And then on Monday mornings, they would get back to work and they would spend the first couple hours of their day trying to figure out what they needed to work on and what the priorities were. If you set those in the moment on Friday when you're working on things, makes a huge difference. So next, let's talk about being mindful of other people's time. Right? So if you are properly managing your own time, that's going to have a positive impact to others. But if you are not managing your own time, that can have a negative impact to others. So let's talk about being late to meetings and calendar invites, right? So I know a ton of people that the default for when you're sending out a calendar invite is 10 minutes. 10 minutes before the meeting is about to happen, that little alert goes off and is like, you have a meeting in 10 minutes. And guess what a lot of people do? They put their head right back down and they're like, all right, let me start preparing. And they start typing and they start looking at things. And then they lose track of time and they're a couple minutes late. So I would highly recommend that if you're one of those that needs that warning to be an actual warning that like you stop everything else that you're doing, I would adjust that warning to go off 5 minutes before your meeting starts, right? 5 minutes is enough time to like, if you got to run to the bathroom real quick, you got to take care of things that you can be kind of interrupted from your deep work and be reminded of that meeting and then start to get prepared and ready. So if 10 minutes is too long for you, adjust your own calendar settings for the reminders to be only 5 minutes. The other thing too that I'm always mindful of when I have a meeting coming up is if I am doing deep dedicated work where I snooze alerts, I always want to be mindful that I'm not snoozing those alerts that would be alerting me to the meeting that I need to be attending. If you need some additional help with making sure that you're not late to meetings, you could always use a kitchen timer, right? They sell them on Amazon. I'll post a link here in the video. They are awesome. All right, now when you're in the meeting, you need to continue to be mindful of other people's time, right? As a project manager or as a leader, or really just as a participant of a call, I always really enjoyed people that would say, hey, does anybody have a hard stop? Let's say the meeting goes from 2 to 3 p.m. Does anybody on the call have a hard stop at 3 p.m.? That's super helpful. It gets stakeholders that are really busy to look at their schedule and be like, oh, actually, I do. Actually, it looks like my assistant just booked me and I have a meeting that I need to jump off for. Then if you're the project manager or if you're the person that's leading the call, you can then be mindful of that and paying attention to that for that stakeholder. You will impress stakeholders, you'll impress everybody on the call. It's super helpful. Especially if you have a meeting too. Let's say you're running this meeting and you have another meeting at the end, back-to-back meetings. It just sets an expectation, and it allows the other participants of the meeting to know, like, okay, this person has another meeting. We need to be mindful of that. And they may even be paying attention as well. So when there's 5 minutes left on the meeting, they may be like, hey, Jason, we know you've got another meeting. Let's go ahead and wrap up here, right? So be mindful of other people's schedules. Another thing I always like doing is I like spacing out meetings. Sometimes that's difficult, we can't avoid the situations where you're trying to get multiple people's schedules to line up and you have to do back-to-back meetings. But it's highly preferable that you have a couple minutes in between meetings. I used to set a 15-minute time block when I was managing projects for after the meeting so that I could type up my meeting notes and be able to send those out. I loved doing those like when things were fresh, right? So like you send out an agenda before the meeting and then you send out a follow-up message to all the stakeholders afterwards about what was discussed and kind of outlining things real quick. I love taking 5 to 10 minutes right after the meeting to type out those messages, so I highly recommend that. Another thing I always really enjoyed doing was I would keep, let's say I was doing a design demo or an engineering demo to stakeholders. I loved having my designers or engineers stay on that call after the other key stakeholders, jumped off or they left the room. And I would just sync with them really fast and do kind of a quick postmortem, right? Or a quick retrospective to see how that call went, how they felt things were received. And it was always amazing that like sometimes designers, they would be like, oh, the client, was frustrated with this. And I'd be like, no, I don't think they were frustrated. Like I thought that they really enjoyed that part of the design or they're really happy with it. And so it really gives you that opportunity to kind of bounce ideas and bounce emotions too off of each other as far as how you felt the meeting went. So I would highly recommend not doing back-to-back meetings for time management too. Now let's talk about prioritizing tasks, right? So like when we have a lot on our plates, sometimes it's hard to know how to manage your time because you don't know what you should be working on, right? So I'm going to go through just a couple frameworks really quick that you can use to help prioritize tasks and things. So first, there's the high, medium, low setting, right? So like high priorities, right? Is there a pending deadline that's looming where I need to get this done? Like there's a meeting tomorrow and I have to have this ready for that meeting tomorrow, right? That would be a high priority item. Does it impact others? Does it open up to risks on the project? Any of those things I usually consider like, all right, if I'm a roadblock and a team member needs to get things done tomorrow, I would say, okay, that's high, right? Then medium, I'd be like, okay, it's due soon, or maybe it's due sometime this week. Maybe there's some medium risk if it doesn't get done this week or if it doesn't get done within the next couple of days. And maybe someone else is impacted by it as well, right? So those are the things that I would kind of consider for a medium priority. And then there's low. And those are kind of like my someday maybe items where I'd be like, okay, this can get done, but it can be done down the road, right? Like I need to document some things, not a super high priority. I'd set a reminder to go off in a week or whatever to remind me that that's something I need to do. But you ultimately don't want to make it, or you want to make sure that it doesn't fall off the radar, right? So you could use the high, medium, low, very similar to that. It's called the Moscow prioritization method. So the M stands for a must have, then there's a should have, a could have, and a will not have. So you could look at that. It's typically a framework that's used in product where you prioritize features, but you can do that with your own tasks that you have as well, right? So like, I must have this done today, right? Or I should have this done today. I could have this done today, or I will not, and it doesn't even matter if it's not done today. You could take a look at those 4 criteria and use that to analyze, use that to prioritize the things that you need to do. There's also effort versus impact. And again, all of these prioritization frameworks, I would say use them on a very high level scale, right? You're not trying to do a deep dive here and really go into the nitty gritty of every single thing that you have to do. You just are trying to use a framework to look at it. And so keep that in mind. All right, so effort versus impact, right? So you take a look at things and you'll be like, well, this is a high effort task, but it's going to be low impact to the project or low impact to the stakeholders. You can use that to help prioritize. I'll do some other videos where we go into great detail as far as what effort and impact is, and there's a whole matrix that I've put together with a bunch of information that is really, really helpful. And so I'll be sharing that down the road. But you could look at the effort and impact, right? So impact would be like, what are the due dates? Are there roadblocks? Is someone else waiting on things? Just like all the other things I've talked about. You could look at how you not completing this task is impacting others. And then you can look at, what the effort load is as well, right? But also with your impact, it doesn't hurt to deliver things early, right? So you could also look at it and say, okay, me getting this done sooner, am I going to win brownie points, or will nobody care, right? Are people going to question why I did this task before I did another task? That was always something that I considered, because even though maybe it was like low effort but high impact, sometimes stakeholders get frustrated when you work on things that, well, hey, I told you this was a higher priority. I know that this was a smaller task. So you just want to keep that in mind and as you're evaluating things. So effort and impact, similar to the effort and impact analysis, there's the Eisenhower matrix, where you essentially look at tasks that are important and urgent, and then important and not urgent. So your important and urgent ones, you do those tasks right away. If they are important and not urgent, then you schedule them, right? And then there's not important. So if it's not important but urgent, you could delegate it, right? You could have somebody else work on that. And then if it's not important and not urgent, chances are you could probably get rid of that task, or again, put it at the bottom of your list. That's the someday maybe item, right, that you take care of. So awesome. Okay, so now that you've got your task prioritized, let's talk about doing dedicated work cycles. Now, if you have, let's say you're a developer, right, and you are snoozing your notifications, that is something you need to consider if you are the one that people go to when the system's not working. So the last thing you want to do is snooze all your notifications, power down your phone, nobody can get a hold of you, and you start writing code. And then, at the end of your 30 minutes, when notifications come back on, you realize that you have missed a ton of things and there's a ton of people that needed you and the sky is falling. You want to avoid that, right? So always make sure, I always called it a bat signal. Make sure that people have the bat signal and they know how to get a hold of you, right? So in Batman, they had that little lantern that would flash up on the night sky and it would show the bat signal, and that was the way they got a hold of Batman. Make sure that you have a bat signal. Sometimes that could be a text message that comes through because maybe those aren't as distracting. And so just make sure if you snooze your notifications, have a bat signal so that people can get a hold of you. You want to minimize your distractions, right? And identify what those distractions are. So if it is social media, or if it's multitasking, or if it's Slack messages, whatever it is, where like you're a chronic multitasker. And so when you get that message and it comes through and you have to take care of it right away, if that's going to be a barrier for you to be able to complete your work, make sure that you're minimizing those distractions. But again, make sure you have that bat signal so that people know how to get a hold of you, right? Okay, let's see. I liked setting timers. So there's a lot of people that use their phone. You could use a kitchen timer as well. Kitchen timers are super helpful because it can sit on your desk and it has, that dial. You set it to the amount of time that you want to do dedicated work. Typically, people do work in like 25 to 30 minute intervals. And so they'll snooze notifications, they'll set a timer for 25 to 30 minutes, and they'll just crank away work on that individual task. That's highly effective. But the thing I like about that dedicated timer, using a kitchen timer, is that it's dedicated, right? My phone gets used for other things, but this kitchen timer, it sits on my desk. I'm able to see it and know like, oh, I'm about to do dedicated work. Let's say I start working on it and I look down at the timer. Oh yeah, I should probably set a timer. There's a lot of science behind setting those timers are really, really effective at helping you get into a deep state of work. So awesome. There's also a tool called, it's called Motion AI, or Use Motion. I am a huge fan of this. I have turned my brother onto this as well, and he was struggling managing his tasks, right? So Use Motion is an AI tool that allows you to be able to create a bunch of tasks that you need. You can set reminders, so you can kind of build like a backlog of all the things that you need to do. You can then set a priority inside of this tool. And what it does is it can auto schedule those on your calendar. So it'll sync with your calendar and it'll see when you have a free moment, and it'll say, hey, this was considered a top priority task. You should probably work on this thing next. Incredibly helpful tool. I would highly recommend using that. It also, if you have a meeting that gets canceled, it can auto book you for your next high priority task that you need to do, which is incredibly helpful. Especially if you don't have as much control over your calendar, I would highly recommend Motion. And like I said, I'll do another video and go into some more details on that. So, all right, let's talk if somebody sends you a message or tries to disrupt things while you are doing dedicated work. So I've been in roles where it's like I was not able to snooze notifications, right? But I had my timer running and I knew I was doing dedicated work, and I would look up at the top of my screen, I'd see that Slack message come through. And what I would do is I would do my best to judge like, hey, is this something I need to do right away? And let's say somebody asks you a question too. Like a common scenario that I would get is people would message me and be like, hey, could you hop on a call real quick? And my first inkling is to say yes, right? Like I'm a people pleaser and sure, I want to jump on that call and be able to help them. But when I'm in my dedicated work and my schedule is technically free, what I would do is I would message back and say, hey, how important is it that we do this in the next 20 minutes, right? Or let's say I had 15 minutes of deep work left. I would reply back, and in a lot of cases, like 9 times out of 10, people would be like, oh yeah, we can talk in 15 minutes. Okay, great. Message me in 15 minutes and let's get a call set up. And then I'd go right back to work. On the dedicated thing. Sometimes that is what you have to do. You don't have that luxury of being able to snooze your notifications. Create your own internal snooze where like you can still reply to them, and if it sounds urgent, can still take care of it, but just ask those questions and make sure you understand. Now, if somebody has like a high priority item, like our website is down, or hey, customers can't check out, or whatever it is, obviously those are the kinds of things you need to take care of right away. And so just keep that in mind. Like not everything is an urgent request and needs to be taken care of right away. So just ask those questions and see if they can meet with you at a later time and if that, disrupts things. So now the next thing is I've talked with a lot of people about time management and how they need to set goals, right? So we can talk about all these tips and tricks and hey, you should do this and hey, you should do that. But none of that matters if you don't actually work on managing your own time, right? So I know plenty of people that are like super late to meetings, right? Or not super late. Let's say they get into that deep dedicated work state and they are always like 3 to 5 minutes late. And the only reason they got out of that deep dedicated work state was because somebody messaged them or called them and said, hey, you're supposed to be, on this call and where are you at, right? So if you're one of those individuals that does struggle to manage your time, you've got to set goals, right? So I would highly recommend either OKRs or the SMART goal framework, where they are specific, measurable goals that have timelines attached to them with both of those frameworks. I would highly recommend that you set goals of how you can better manage your time. And going back to that example, if you're late to meetings, set a goal to not be late, right? But then there's action items to your goals. So like I've talked about in this video, if you are somebody that's late and you set a goal that you do not want to be late anymore and you're going to be on time to all of your meetings, then what is the action item that you're going to do, right? Because let's say you do like to get into that deep, dedicated state of work, set those timers, use that kitchen timer and have that sucker go off 5 minutes before that meeting is about to happen, right? Or if you, adjust the calendar invites, right? So that goes off. Or do both. Adjust the calendar invite for it to go off 5 minutes before the meeting, and then set that kitchen timer to go off 3 minutes before the meeting so that you have that alert and you know that your meeting is going to start. Doing just that one small little thing, and I know that's like it's going out of your way and it's doing something different than what you've done. But if you historically, even if you're only late to 2 out of every 5 meetings, doing something so small as setting a little timer before you start your dedicated work can make a huge difference. So I hope these tips helped. Like I said, don't be afraid to set goals. You've got to set goals and you've got to have action items so that you improve. And those are my tips on time management. Thank you for watching. Hopefully you liked this video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you and have a wonderful day.